Today is the day that every roster across the National Football League has to get down to 53 men. Some tough decisions will be made. We're here to talk about that, plus more on Tuesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for August 27th, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thanks so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. And as always, if you're checking us out on YouTube, you know we appreciate that. The show grows each and every day. That's because of the support of you, Raider Nation, and because of my man Ari, who does a great job each and every day getting us on YouTube, making sure we're looking good, we're sounding good, takes a ton of pride in his work, and really definitely appreciate that. And that's why the show has grown in such a major way. So shout out Ari. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line 707-654-4693 as we are right here on the day of the cut downs. Plenty of calls, plenty of texts, a lot of folks talking about the roster, folks talking about the quarterback position, certain players that they think should make it, shouldn't make it, whatever the case may be. Ton of feedback that we've received so far. We'll get as much in as possible coming up. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Last week, had a text from a listener, and it came right off the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line about a couple surprise cuts and a couple guys that I think are going to make it. We'll finally address that question. We'll do it in segment number 2, talk about a couple guys that I got my eye on, a couple surprise cuts, and a couple guys that I definitely think earn their spot on the 53-man roster. So we'll do that in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here in segment number 1, news and notes of the day, as I always do, and we'll jump right into it after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. And right now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. We'll tell you more about them later on in the show, but off top, I kind of teased it on Monday's show, talking about the pregame show that I did at Allegiant Stadium with Richie Incognito, former Raider offensive lineman. And I mentioned that I had a couple sound bites that I wanted to play and really wanted to get to it, but I knew I didn't have enough time because I wanted to go over the game as well. Well, I figured here in segment number 1, I can go ahead and get those in right now. Don't have a ton of news and notes. Obviously, we will tomorrow when we have the official cuts, and we'll be able to go through all that and talk about it and really break it down. So don't think I'll have a lot of time. Plus, it'll be a little bit dated, a few days removed from the actual pregame show. But there was a couple sound bites from Richie Incognito that we talked about on the pregame show on Friday at Allegiant Stadium that I wanted to bring to the table. He was really good at doing the whole pregame show. I hope to do more shows with him at some capacity in some platform, whether it's the radio station, maybe it's at Allegiant Stadium as a pregame show, maybe even having him here on the podcast. But he was fantastic. And one of the first things I talked to him about was the fact that he was at camp in Costa Mesa every day. Antonio Pierce was saying, okay, hey, anytime you want to come out, come on out. Richie showed up every day and he had cleats on. So you could tell that he was itching to get out there. He missed being out there with the fellas, and he helped out with the offensive line, and James Craig and everyone, the offensive line coach, was all able to give them a helping hand. So here's Richie Incognito just on being out at camp in Costa Mesa.
AP told us, he's like, yeah, I told Richie anytime he's around, come on by. Next thing I know, Richie's out there on the grass with his cleats on. It's like, you look like you're ready to go.
I was there every day. AP said, you can come whenever you want. I said, okay, bet. I'll be here every day.
Right. That is awesome. That is awesome. Well, what was that whole experience like? I mean, you got to talk to the guys. He mentioned that. Hey, Richie talked to our crew last night before we put pads on. Just how was that?
Yeah, it was great. You know, it's kind of like clicking back into player mode, player days. Went there and got the boys fired up. You know, it's a new journey. It's a new opportunity. It's an opportunity for the guys to come together. That was the whole mission of Costa Mesa. Go out to Costa Mesa, get some good work in, get some great weather, but really come together as a team.
Right.
And, you know, I just kept telling them, you know, it's all about you guys. It's all about the players. It's all about coming together. It's all about, you know, making those bonds. It's all about playing hard for one another because it's us on the field. It's us out there playing like brothers. So that was great, man, to go talk to him and then to be able to spend time with him at training camp. You know,
right.
I loved it. Like you said, I was out there with my cleats on. I had
were.
my shades on. I was ready to go.
I know.
But,
I know you were, man. That was cool to see, and just to see the way that they also embraced you. Right? Because, I mean, sometimes there might be a player that, what does he know? But
yes.
They all look like they embraced you and were listening to what you had to say.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. You know, I have a really good relationship with Andre James and Colton Miller.
Yeah.
I played with those guys. But the young guys, you know, they kind of just fall in line. They're like, oh, Richie's here. We're going to use him. So it was great to be out there and helping them out. You know, I see the game at such a detailed level. To be able to change a thing here, move this, do this, change this technique by a half inch, you know, it's invaluable for these guys.
That's Richie Incognito from Friday, the pregame show at Allegiant Stadium. It was a Raider Alumni Day. Over 300 members of the Raiders at some capacity, whether you were there for 10 years or 2 days, right? It didn't matter. You know, once a Raider, always a Raider. So many guys were in the building, and Richie had a great time. But that was him just talking about being at camp and what it meant to him to be there and how he got the invite. And AP let us know that, you know, I told him to come on out, and Richie showed up every single day. That just kind of lets you know the want to that Richie had. And I had mentioned to him about the way he helped mature Colton Miller. Colton Miller was a guy that everyone knew he was talented when the Raiders selected him in the first round, but it seemed like he was still trying to find his way. When Richie Incognito came in, kind of toughened him up a little bit, helped mature him. So he talks about the maturing of Colton Miller, kind of what that process was like, and also Andre James and how he became a member of the Raiders offensive line and the starting center for the Silver and Black. Here's Richie Incognito on Colton Miller and Andre James.
What you were able to provide along that offensive line, especially next to Colton Miller, I feel like you helped mature him.
Yes.
And I think everyone needs that guy.
Yes, absolutely. And you know what? I've done it with a lot of other tackles before, too. You know, young guys, Deion Dawkins of Buffalo.
Yep.
But Colton was, you know, my special project. When I came in, Gruden said, listen, this kid is super talented. We need to get him calmed down. We need to get him settled down. We got to get him playing good technique. And one of our first practices together, I remember Colton was on the line freaking out, and I was like, brother, you just be quiet. I'm going to tell you what to do
right.
every single play. I just need you to be quiet. And, you know, to watch guys like that, you know, grow their confidence and get better. And then, you know, I retired, and he's had 2 Pro Bowl years.
Right.
You know, it's great to sit back and watch him, and especially Andre James, too. Andre James is one of my best friends, and, you know, to mentor those guys and teach them how to be a pro, you know, it's kind of like a proud dad moment. I can sit back and watch these 2 guys are the cornerstones of the offensive line.
I remember when you retired and we were in the Intermountain Health Performance Center, you were speaking to the media and you said, Andre James, watch out for him. You know, you mentioned, you said he's coming along, and, you know, this guy was an undrafted free agent, right? And he had to convert himself to a center, but that's just a testament to hard work.
Yes, absolutely. You know, it was a wild ride for Andre. You know, Colton was drafted 15th overall in 2018. Andre was Colton's roommate. They had the same agent. They knew Coach Cable really well. So Andre got an opportunity with the Raiders because of Colton Miller. And then when he came in, you know, he played right tackle at UCLA.
Right.
And then they had him snapping the ball, and he's like, I have no idea what I'm doing. You know, he was launching balls over the quarterback's head.
Right.
Gruden's freaking out. But, you know, he solidified himself as a backup to Rodney, who was a great center.
Yeah, he was.
Great leader. You know, it was awesome for Andre to watch him play. And then I'll never forget it, you know, like Andre's baby steps. It's we're down in Houston. Rodney goes down. Andre comes into the game.
I remember that
He
game.
winds up rolling his ankle, and he's like, dude, my ankle's messed up. I was like, I don't care.
Right.
We don't care. You better be out on this field. And he balled out, and he wound up earning himself a nice contract that next season. So he's a baller. He's a stud. He's durable. And he's a very smart center. You know, everyone's learning this new system. And he's done a really good job bringing guys along.
Is there a certain point that you get to where it's like everything slows down? I hate to say slow down because nothing out here is slow, but it just seems like, okay, I get it now.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the game, you know, even from practice, you know, training camp practices are really intense because each situation is scripted, like I was saying before. Okay, this is 3rd down period. This is 1st and 10. When you get out in the game, the older you get and the more reps you get, the game reps really do slow down. Practice is when you get things really fast and it's kind of hectic because you're learning it. But as you get older, you know, your 2nd, 3rd, 4th year of starting, things start to slow down, and then things start jumping out at you, like pressure and blitzes and safety alignment and all that stuff. So, you know, I tell the guys, you got to be a film room junkie. Like, you don't know what you're looking at right now, but as the more you look, it's going to start popping out to you, and you're going to learn from that.
So I thought that was really good stuff. I mean, look, the pregame show was an hour and a half. We talked to guys like Jason Horowitz. We talked to all kind of different former players, and just we had a really good show. We had Vinny Bonsignore on there. We had JTEA, Lincoln Kennedy, Ryan Hogue was part of the show. So many folks were part of the show, and like I said, it was an hour and a half long, so couldn't put all of that on here, but thought that those were a couple of good sound bites from Richie Incognito. Like I said, it was really good to hear him and actually do a show with him. Had a lot of fun on Friday. Was really blessed to be in that situation and that opportunity. As I mentioned earlier, as we know, today is the cut down day at 1 p.m. Pacific time. Every team, not just the Raiders, have to have their roster trimmed down to 53 men. A lot of teams are already going through the process of that, including the Raiders. And so they have a handful of players that they've already released, and these are all unconfirmed. The Raiders will confirm them later on today. They'll put out a statement that has all the guys that were released. Some of these guys are going to be reverted back to the practice squad once they clear waivers. Tom Telesco is actually going to have a press conference coming up at 2 p.m. Pacific time. So that's right when my radio show starts. So I'm trying to work the magic where I can be on the radio and still kind of at the press conference. Is going to be by way of Zoom. So I'll be able to be on the call. And I'm trying to get a couple questions in as well at the same time as doing a radio show. So that's going to be a challenge, but that's okay. I'm here for that challenge, and he'll go over the cuts and the releases and the plans for some of these players and what went into it. That'll be all around 2 o'clock Pacific time. But as of right now, and this is subject to change, the Raiders have released defensive back Wu Governor. He was a guy that actually did some good things in training camp and preseason. He's a guy that I expect him to want to put back on the practice squad, but I think that he's going to get some attention around the league. So it might be difficult for him to end up making it back to the practice squad, but they have released him. Again, these are all unconfirmed. Also, defensive tackle Noah Shannon waived by the Raiders. Defensive end Ron Stone Jr. Obviously, he's got the Raider heritage with his pops, Ron Stone, being a member of the Silver and Black as well. He's been waived. They've also waived defensive end TJ Franklin. He was a young man from Temple, Texas. He's actually the man that I covered in high school when he was a Temple Wildcat. I think he's going to end up probably reverting back to the practice squad. I don't think that TJ's done anything too major to have a team say, hey, we want to pick that guy up. He's going to be a good addition to the team. So I'm sure that they'll have the opportunity to put TJ on the practice squad. Defensive tackle Marquand McCall, also a guy that the Raiders have released. Cornerback Rashad Williams, he's been released, and wide receiver Tyrell Bynum. So those are the guys, again, all unconfirmed by the Silver and Black, that so far have been released in their efforts to get down to 53 men. So they go from 90 to 53, and then they'll get 14 guys on the practice squad. And so some of those guys will be able to come back to the team and continue their careers. Some guys will get picked up by other teams and try to continue their careers. And some guys, the dream will be over unless another team picks them up at some stage of the game. But as of right now, those guys are released, and we'll find out again by 1 p.m. Pacific time who officially makes the 53-man roster and who doesn't. But who are the Raiders' surprise cuts? Who are some guys that I think have earned their spot onto the roster? We got a really good question from Just Win Will. He hit us up last week on the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. I did not have an answer for him then. I have an answer for him now. We'll do that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. And you've heard me talk a lot about FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. They have something different for you now. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. If you're out of market, it's fantastic. You can watch every single Raider game if you have this NFL Sunday Ticket. So if you have that and you have a basic YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game, Raiders or any other team in the league. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and then you can cancel at any time. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to jump into the text message that we received last week from Just Win Will, and I didn't have an answer for him. And it's very rare that I don't have an answer, right? I might have the wrong answer at times, but I normally have an answer. But no joke, Just Win Will actually pretty much stumped me. I want to say that it was maybe Friday morning before I actually got to see the game at Allegiant Stadium against the 49ers. It was either Friday or Thursday. It was late last week when he sent this text in, and I said, I'm going to definitely answer the question. I just haven't answered it as of yet. And it's funny, my guy, Brother Marquise in the 305 rep Miami actually hit me up and was like, all right, so you got to have an idea. Who do you think it is? And I was like, no, really, I honestly don't have an idea just yet. I got to see this game on Friday night, and then I'll be able to come to some kind of conclusion. So for any that did not hear, or the text from Just Win Will, he says, Q, got a question for you. With cut day on the horizon, who are your 2 roster surprises? By that, I mean, who is a player that you think will get cut but makes the 53, and the guy you think will make it and gets cut? I know you cut a meek like 3 seasons in a row, LOL. Just want to throw that out there. The answer for me for my question is Tyree Wilson for the guy we think is safe but gets cut. I don't have a response for the surprise player that will make the squad. Thanks, Q, for everything you do for the nation. Just Win Will out. Raiders. So there you go. That was Just Win Will. And it's funny. I'll actually address yours first, Tyree Wilson. I don't think that he's – I know he's not going to get cut. Now, being a former first-round pick, number 7 overall just a year ago, they're not going to cut him. Now, would they move him? Maybe. I don't think that that's going to happen either. But as I said on Monday's show, I was very surprised that he did not play on Friday versus the 49ers. I thought if anything he's the one who needs the most reps, right? He just needs rep on top of rep on top of rep just to give himself an opportunity to get comfortable and confident in what he's doing. And he just has not gotten there, and he's moving really slowly. Baby steps is what he's taking. That's their words, not mine. So I thought it made more sense that he actually got reps, and he didn't. So maybe they're really comfortable with where he is. Maybe they are trying to move him. I doubt it, but I think that there's a possibility of that. But I know that they're not going to cut him. They're not going to waive him. He's too valuable. If he were to get waived, he'd get picked up immediately, right? I mean, just because of his raw traits that he has. Now Tom Telesco could trade him and say, look, I didn't draft him. Right? I mean, he could do the same thing with cutting him. I just don't see that happening. But I understand why you'd say that, because it's kind of frustrating that, he just hasn't started to come along, especially now that he's healthy. So as far as me, what I'm thinking, my surprise cut, and I talked about this guy on Monday's show quite a bit, Dylan Lobby, 6th-round pick out of New Hampshire, a guy that I was very high on all training camp long. Kept saying that this guy's going to be a difference maker. I even made a bet with Vic Tafer from The Athletic that he was actually going to get some pretty good offensive burn with the Raiders in 2024. I made a pretty good bet with them, and I honestly feel like I'm going to lose that bet. Now, I do believe he's going to make the practice squad. I don't think that they're going to cut him and he's going to get picked up by another team. He just hasn't done anything. And I know that some people will say, well, you can't blame him for just one fumble or whatever. No, I mean, I can't, but I can, right? And the reason I'm saying that is he got the start on Friday versus the 49ers. He had 3 carries, and then he had that fumble. And, you can say whatever the case was why he had the fumble, but AP has harped on ball security, right? And so he didn't have the ball security, and he really hasn't done too much. He had a couple decent runs, but he only had 3, and then he never came back in the game. So for one reason or the other, we didn't get to see too much of him, and we didn't see too much from him in the other 2 games. So I think that he's going to be the surprise cut. Normally, I would say that he's probably going to make it, and especially with his skill set. But now that I'm seeing these different players that have made plays in the kick return game and the punt return game, I'm thinking that maybe he's not as valuable as I thought he was, because now they have other playmakers that have stepped up. So Dylan Lobby is the one that I already talked about. But the other one, I'm going to say Andrews Pete. Right? He's a guy that is a really good insurance policy at the left tackle position behind Colton Miller, but Colton Miller's back. Right? It was a good veteran signing, I thought. But the fact that, this guy played left tackle, and Vinny Bonsignore pointed this out to me because I wasn't able to go to the night practices last week, and they have a couple night practices this week that I won't be able to go to either. But he was playing not only left tackle, but he'd slide over to the right tackle spot, almost like they were trying to find a spot for him. So I think he might be a guy that's on the roster bubble. Right? I mean, he hasn't been fantastic. You kind of know what to expect from him. You got Colton Miller back, and this is the reason why I think that he's expendable. You've got Colton Miller back. If something were to happen to him, I think you could slide Thayer Mumford over to that left tackle spot, and you could immediately put DJ Glaze, the rookie, the 3rd-round pick out of Maryland. You could slide him into the right tackle spot. Now, that takes a hit on your depth. I think that you'll see Tom Telesco really working the waiver wire, right, and try to build up some depth. But I really haven't seen what I think you need to see from Andrews Pete. Now, Cody Whitehair, another veteran, he's been much better. He's going to be the guy that's going to start the season because I'm sure JPJ won't be available to go. So those are the 2 guys that I look at to be the surprise cuts. Dylan Lobby, the 6th-round pick out of New Hampshire, and the longtime veteran left tackle Andrews Pete. I just think that there's a good chance that he doesn't make it either. So, and who knows, right? I mean, you can have a couple veterans on your practice squad. Maybe they'll put them on the practice squad as well. A lot of these guys that get cut, they're going to put them back on the practice squad. I mean, they're familiar with them. They worked with them all summer. They're not just going to let them go and then go and get some other guys that they haven't worked with. So a lot of these guys that you see get cut today, you'll see end up being put back onto the practice squad as long as they don't get picked up off of waivers by another team. Now, guys that I think will make the roster, and I mentioned these guys on Monday's show as well, and I'm going to actually give you 3 instead of 2. And the reason I'm only going to give you 3 is because 2 of the guys I'm going to put as kind of a 1A and 1B. And that's the guys that I talked about quite a bit on Monday's show, Tyreek McAllister and Amari Gaynor. Amari Gaynor, a guy out of North Carolina, a rookie. The fact that he had 12 tackles, he called the defense from that linebacker position for the first time in his career and held his own, did a really good job. I think that this is a guy that could see some pretty good playing time sometime this year. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be called upon. And really, he could be giving Divine Diablo a push and a run for his money. I don't think that Divine Diablo is in any position to get cut, but Divine is going into the last year of his deal. And so are they going to re-sign him or are they going to let him walk in free agency? I could definitely see Divine being the guy that they end up letting walk in free agency. Tommy Eichenberg, I think, is going to end up on the IR, at least short-term IR, and miss a few games. So I think that's how they're going to kind of maneuver that. So to have a guy like Amari Gaynor, have him there as depth along with Luke Masterson, I think that'll be a really good thing. So I put Tyreek McAllister and Amari Gaynor as 1A and 1B. McAllister with that punt return ability, that's just a game changer that the Raiders haven't had. Think about this. And I really hate that this is the case, and this is a fact for the Raiders. The Raiders have not had a punt return touchdown since 2018, in a regular season game, obviously, since 2018. That was Dwayne Harris on Monday Night Football against the Broncos. Remember when the ball was rolling, it looked like the Broncos were going to pick it up, and then all of a sudden Dwayne Harris grabbed it, and everyone was like, no, until he hit the outside and ran up the sideline 99 yards for a touchdown, and then everyone said, yeah, right? You remember that heart attack play as well? That was the last time they had a punt return touchdown. The last time they had a kick return touchdown was Jacoby Ford. You know how long ago that was? 2011. 2011 was the last time they had a kick return touchdown. And the last time a punt return was 2018. That's got to change. As far as I'm concerned, both of those need to happen in 2024. Not saying that they're going to, but that's why they're bringing, that they changed the rules of the kick return because they want to see that come back into play. But, man, the Raiders have just been bad at it. Right? I mean, at least every other team, I feel like, has got at least one taken to the house in between 2011 and 2024. The Raiders haven't had one kick return to the house since 2011. That's wild. And not a punt return since 2018. So for that reason alone, I think Tyreek McAllister makes the roster. I think he has that big play ability that you don't want to let go. I'll tell you this. They let Tyreek go, someone's picking him up. He ain't clearing waivers. There's no way he clears waivers. Just with that speed alone, there's a handful of teams right now that would say, you know what, we'll take a chance on him. The Chiefs would be one of them. Baltimore would be another one. Buffalo would be another one. Dallas would probably be another one, right? And I mean, they'd have to go through waiver wire order, right? And the Raiders are sitting there at number 13 to claim teams off of waivers. But you look at some of those teams, you think that they wouldn't use that speed? Psh, come on. Chargers would be one that want to add that speed to their roster. So, yeah, he ain't clearing waivers. So you can't waive him. He's earned his roster spot. There's no doubt about it. But the other guy that I'll give you, Charles Snowden. He's listed behind Max Crosby and behind Tyree Wilson. He's third on the depth chart at the defensive end. I would say Charles Snowden and Janarius Robinson have done more and stepped up and been seen more than Tyree Wilson has been. So I look at Charles Snowden as a guy that I feel like he's earned his spot. He had a sack on Friday night against the 49ers. He's a guy that consistently showed up in training camp. People kept saying his name, him and Janarius Robinson. I should give you, I guess, a 2A and 2B, right? How about I do that? How about Charles Snowden and Janarius Robinson? I think both those guys definitely earned their spot. You want to talk about some depth. You want to talk about having some fresh guys along that defensive line to bring in there. So Max and Malcolm Kuntz and whoever's out there doesn't have to go all the time. I think you don't miss too much when Charles Snowden and Janarius Robinson are out there. Now, I'm not saying that they take a ton of snaps, but they can still be part of a healthy rotation. Just like, we see Adam Butler there at the defensive tackle position is behind John Jenkins. So you got your starters, Max Crosby, Malcolm Kuntz, Christian Wilkins, and John Jenkins. And then you've got some really good depth as far as I'm concerned. When you have Charles Snowden, Janarius Robinson, Adam Butler, those guys are all depth pieces right there. Tyree Wilson obviously is in the mix as well, but where is he going to play? That's going to be a question. Where is he going to play at along that defensive line? Will the Raiders go out and add some more depth at defensive tackle, depending on who gets cut and released and goes to the waiver? Sure, I think so. I think that's a no-brainer that they'll probably do that. Go ahead and add a little bit more depth, especially since nobody really knows what Tyree Wilson's going to be. If I could tell you what he was going to be for sure, then maybe that question is different, but I just don't know. I've said it before. Maybe Tyree is a guy that just ends up playing on the inside, right? And he has an opportunity to beat a guard, right, instead of trying to come from the outside and beat a tackle because he's not getting off very quickly. And maybe he has a better opportunity to beat that guard on the inside than he does with those tackles on the outside. I mean, he's got the size to do it. He has the speed. He just hasn't been using it. He's thinking too much. We say it all the time. Think. You think, you study long, you study wrong is what I say. And right now he's studying wrong. So those are the guys that I have as far as surprise cuts and guys that I think will make it. Dylan Lobby, no doubt about it. I feel like he's a practice squad dude. Andrews Pete, two guys that I think end up getting released by 1 p.m. this afternoon. Guys who make it, Tyreek McAllister and Amari Gaynor, 1A and 1B, and Charles Snowden and Janarius Robinson, 2A and 2B. So I gave you more than you asked for, but Just Win Will, thanks so much for that text. It was really good because you stumped me. You really did, man. You did a hell of a job. So definitely thank you for that. I appreciate it. Well, what's on your mind? 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. Your calls and texts are coming up next as we close out the show for this Tuesday. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with North Jersey Sussex Raiders. He's calling to disagree with me about Dylan Lobby and where he stands on the roster. Here he is, North Jersey Sussex Raider.
Hello, Q. North Jersey Sussex Raider here, man. Listen, I just wanted to call real quick, first-time caller. But I got to do this, man. I got to disagree with your take on Dylan Lobby with regards to, I guess, being disappointed. The specific play where he took that hit and he fumbled, man. I think if you look at it closely, at least from my vantage point, I think my man got, he got hit helmet to helmet. I think there should have been a penalty, a flag called on that play, and my man may have even been knocked out for a split second. I think that's why he fumbled. Obviously, he's got to learn from it. He's now in the big time, and he knows that people are going to knock his block off if he doesn't protect himself. So I got to disagree with your take on Dylan Lobby. I think he's going to be fine. I'll be surprised if he gets cut. But I think the reason why he didn't come back is I think our sideline, our team picked up on that, and he may have even I think he may have even been experiencing concussion-like symptoms, which is probably why he didn't come back in out of precaution. So that's my take on I guess your take with regards to Dylan Lobby, man. So I think he's going to be fine. And again, a flag should have been called on that play. I'm surprised the medical team didn't pick up on that. But anyways, man, keep up the great work as usual, Q. And we'll talk to you soon, man. I appreciate the time. Later.
My man. Thanks for the call. Appreciate you. And you very well could be right? I mean, Lobby's a guy that I had high hopes for. I talked about him quite a bit during training camp. Hell, I talked about him a lot during OTAs and mandatory minicamp and even rookie minicamp. Hey, man, there's this guy, number 23, Dylan Lobby, 6th-round pick out of New Hampshire. They sure are giving him a lot of attention. They sure are putting the ball in his hands and getting it to him any way that they could. And they were. And again, that's the one problem with not going up against another team in training camp and just waiting for the preseason games, is that you just don't know how good a guy looks until he goes up against an opponent. And Lobby, I thought, was doing some pretty good things in training camp. I really did, but haven't seen anything from him in preseason. And of course, the cherry on top was obviously Friday night. And I say cherry on top, very tongue in cheek. Obviously, it wasn't a highlight. And maybe you're right. Maybe he was concussed. We didn't get any notification in the press box that he was. There was no notification that, Dylan Lobby is out for the game. There was none of that in the press box. And that's normally what they do with the injury. So maybe they just didn't want it to be known. Maybe they just held him out on his own as precautionary. You could be absolutely right. But I just don't think that he's done a whole lot. And there's some really talented dudes on this roster that if they're going to make the 53, they better be able to contribute. They better be able to hold their own. And I think that there's some guys that made a name for themselves that nobody was counting on to make a name for themselves until they did it. Again, it's just me. I could be wrong. Like my man Just Win Will said, I cut a Meek Robinson 3 years in a row. So, I cut Dylan Lobby. He very easily could make the roster, and I'll have to tell him in the locker room, hey, man, what did it feel like to make the roster? A lot of people were counting you out, including me, and you made it. And I'll do that. I have no problem with that. That's the one thing I've never had a problem with. I told Meek that I cut him 3 times, and he just laughed and said, you weren't the only one. So, I mean, it happens, right? Again, this is just my opinion. I'm not getting, I don't have any sources that are telling me that. Another guy, and I guess going back to segment 2, a guy that I think is going to get cut is Byron Young, the 3rd-round pick out of Alabama. And I talked about him on Monday's show as well. I think he's going to get cut for sure. And he'll probably make the practice squad because I don't think anyone out there is going to pick him up. I keep saying, kind of tongue-in-cheek, kind of laughing, so I'm not really 100% serious. I wonder if the Raiders, when they drafted Byron Young, drafted the wrong one. Because there's a Byron Young that's really good and played his tail off and was flashing. I believe he's in the Rams, and he's really good. And then there's Byron Young that the Raiders have. I almost wonder if they turned in the card on the wrong Byron Young. I'll never know the answer to that. I'm sure Dave Ziegler, I can reach out to him and ask him. He's not going to tell me. because that's kind of embarrassing. So I don't think that he would tell me that, but it is something that I've wondered. And I've asked some people that I respect, like, Vic Tafer and Vinny Bonsignor and Adam Hill. And, they all kind of give me that look of, well, it could happen. So there's that. But anyway, that was just, I forgot to mention him in segment number 2. But anyway, North Jersey Sussex Raider, thanks so much for the call. I appreciate you. Hopefully that's not the last one, man. Thanks so much for contributing to the show. Up next, got a text from Andrew the Raider. Says, "Sup, Q? Are you getting the impression that Raider Nation is already hitting the panic button? From my vantage point, it kind of seems that way. And I just think that A, super premature, and B, out of step with attitudes and culture of guys like Max and AP. Panic and Raider swagger are like oil and water. One more thing. Who do I got to reach out to get the video and graphics crew inside Allegiant Stadium to display a quiet down, offenses on the field message? My boy Gardner is trying to do his thing on the field. Haha, thanks for all that you do, Q. Andrew the Raider." And it's funny, I'll answer the second part first. They actually have that video. They actually do have that quiet down, offense is working or whatever like that. And it's weird how, and I guess because it's not just a Raider crowd. Like on Friday night, it was a lot of 49er fans. So the 49er fans were screaming and yelling on third down and on third and long or whatever the case may be. That's the one disadvantage that Allegiant Stadium has, is that there are so many of the opposing fans that you're going to get that. And at times it's kind of embarrassing, right? I mean, to hear, 4th and 1 or whatever, and all of a sudden the crowd is amped up and, it's super loud. That's the part that really stinks. But again, that's the Las Vegas feature. And that's that's kind of comes from being in Las Vegas, that teams are going to, they're going to attract their fans there too, because people want to come to Vegas. It's simple as that. And the Raiders have not established a winning culture there. They start, winning consistently there, people are going to think about spending all the money that they have to spend to come to Las Vegas and see a game. And the reason I know that, because Raider Nation already thinks twice about coming to Vegas and spending their money. How many times does somebody in Raider Nation have a season ticket and they sell it because they don't want to go and spend the money on hotels, food, entertainment, the game, whatever the case may be? That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for me. And I'm here in Vegas locally, right? And I get into the game for free. But if I get tickets for family and friends, it's expensive. And that's literally just tickets to get in, right? Let alone going out to eat afterwards or before or whatever the case may be. All of a sudden you look up and you spend a few grand for a weekend for one game. And you're like, man, it'll take me a bunch of shows to replace that money, right? That's just how it goes. But yeah, so they do have one of those videos, and I'm sure that they're going to put it up. But at the same time, there's going to be opposing fans that are always going to make a lot of noise. And as far as, Raider Nation already hitting the panic button, I think there's a little bit of that setting in, especially from the point of all Raider Nation has heard all offseason, all training camp, is that the defense was going to be lights out. And then all of a sudden you see the defense struggle to stop the run. And to me, that's a little bit of concern. I'm a little concerned about that. And I've seen this defense up close and personal for 17 days in Costa Mesa, and the defense was great. They stopped the run. But now all of a sudden you're seeing them against 3 different opponents give up over 100 yards on the ground. That is concerning. So I think there's a little bit of panic and maybe panic's the wrong word. I'd probably just say concern. There's definitely some concern there. And, the Raiders have, a little bit of time before the first game of the season is coming up September 8th against the Chargers in L.A. I think that they can get that cleaned up, but they've really got to put an emphasis on it, and they've got to have that want to. We are not going to get the ball ran down our throats. We are going to stop the run. That's what they have to be saying to each other in that locker room. But thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate you. Up next, I got a call from the 828. He didn't give his name, and he lets me know why he doesn't give his name. But he's calling to talk about winning and how that's what he wants his team to do more than anything, and explains what he means and the lengths he'll go to. But he's not really feeling it about this upcoming season. Here it is, a call from the 828.
Q, Ari, sorry guys, but this is going to be a vent. Maybe it's because I'm too stressed out. Maybe. I'm not sure. But I'm going through my day-to-day Raider content, and of course I listen to Rich Eisen as well as y'all every single day. Locked On Raiders podcast is first. But I want to know what's going on with the rest of the NFL, so I go to Rich Eisen because I think he's the best. So, you're number one, he's number 1A. Anyways, I was listening when Max Crosby called in, and we were with Josh McDaniels, and we went 1-3 in the beginning of the season. And I remember it so well. They spoke about, Max Crosby spoke about, we're in a results business. We got 2 seasons in a row where the results were terrible. And now this is going to be something that the rest of Raider Nation hates. That's why I didn't put my name down. So, Raider Nation, don't think I don't love Max Crosby. Don't think I don't love Davante Adams. But if we're not winning, I don't care anymore. I want to win. I want to win. I don't care that Max Crosby turned his entire life around. It's not the Las Vegas Max Crosbys. It's the Las Vegas Raiders. Results, industry, business. I want to win. We need to win. It's not good for the Raiders not to win. It's just un-American if you really think about it. America are a bunch of Raiders, and that's why we're the first to say Raiders Nation. Trade them all. Trade everybody. They start off crappy. Get rid of every single person on that team. I'm done. I want to win. Become winners. And that's all I got to say.
Thanks so much for the call. I appreciate you. I hear you. Appreciate the support. I don't see that happening, right? I don't hear that extreme that you're talking about happening. Look, I understand if the Raiders get off to a bad start, the temptation would be to make some moves, and maybe that's a conversation about Davante later on, but Max is a non-negotiable. It's just that straight. Max is a non-negotiable. You can't win without players and playmakers and difference makers. Max Crosby is a difference maker and a playmaker. He's non-negotiable. He ain't going nowhere. He is literally the face of the franchise. You don't move that guy. Regardless, it doesn't matter what you get in return. You're not moving Max Crosby. And perfect example of that is the Raiders have gone that route before, right? They moved Khalil Mack. They moved Amari Cooper. They went and got 3 first-round picks in one draft. They got multiple first-round picks in another draft. And what do they have to show for it? Nothing. Nothing, right? Cleve Farrell, gone. Josh Jacobs, gone. Jonathan Abram, gone. Henry Ruggs, gone. Damon Arnett, gone. Trayvon Mullen, second-round pick, gone, right? 3 third-round picks that Mike Mayock called like stealing. Those are starters, gone, right? I mean, they literally got nothing out of all that trading that they did to get draft capital in return to rebuild the team, which was probably a good idea in theory. Gone. Nothing to show for it. All they got was 5 good years of production out of Josh Jacobs. 4 good years of production and a holdout the last year, and a not happy Josh Jacobs, and he had an okay season. Still like the player a lot. Glad the Raiders drafted him, but he's gone. So they literally have nothing to show for exactly what you're saying. Do trade everybody and start over. What does that mean? What does that guarantee? Nothing. Nothing at all. But thanks for the call. I understand, and yeah, it was definitely unpopular. And next time you can leave your name. Nobody's gonna come after you. It is what it is. It's free to have your own opinion around here. That's why we do this. That's why we have the voicemail line, so you can leave whatever message you want. I appreciate you. We'll close out with a text from Green Mountain Raider. It's a pretty lengthy one. It says, "Hey Q, Green Mountain Raider here, sequestered deep within Pat's country. I've endured much BS living where I live, even from friends living in Denver who told me we'd be sorry we hired who we hired, or who shall not be named, and just want to say I celebrated when he who shall not be named was fired." Talking about Josh McDaniels, obviously. 2 things I love. AP has brought back to the Raiders number 1, pride in who we are as a team and what we represent, as you can see from the pictures I represent on the daily. But what I noticed is that Raider Nation is showing up and showing out in Patriots country all of a sudden, and I attribute that to AP and what he has said and done from day one. 2, the truth. AP says it like it is. He doesn't sugarcoat it, even when it comes to the fact that he doesn't know everything about being a first-time coach. He surrounded himself with the right people, asked the right questions, because he's all about making us great again. And that is obvious. He is Raider Nation based, not self-based. Anyway, Q, thank you for what you do and what you represent for the nation. You bring us the truth and don't sugarcoat it. We love that. Preseason has done what it was supposed to do and help us figure out what we have and what we don't have. We'll know what we really have once we make the cut downs to the 53-man roster. I'm excited for the first time in many years, but also realistic and hoping for a playoff game this year. Let's go Raiders. That is Green Mountain Raider there in Patriots country. Thanks for the text. And yeah, I mean, AP, the one thing he's done has brought a lot of pride back to the organization. He's restored the Raider way. He's got that culture of that locker room where it needs to be, right? He's got the guys in that locker room believing in him, believing in the rest of the coaching staff, and that's half the battle, right? That's a sign of a good leader, someone who can get the team to go and have a whole bunch of car crashes on a Sunday afternoon or a Monday afternoon or a Thursday afternoon, right? And that's what they do, right? They're having many car crashes every play, and he's getting them to go and give everything that they got and leave it all on the field. Now, the thing is, now that he's done all that, that's great. Now he's got to win. It's all about just win, baby. He's got to win games. If you don't win games, all the good things that he's done doesn't matter, right? I had Trey Wingo on my radio show on Monday, and we were talking about Trey Lance, and Trey Lance had a good game, obviously against the Raiders for the Cowboys before at Allegiant Stadium 2 weeks ago, and then last week on Saturday he had a game where he did some really good things, but then he threw 5 interceptions, and Trey said the only thing that matters is he threw those 5 interceptions. He could do everything that he did really well. He threw 5 picks. That just kind of voids everything else that he did. So, it's great that AP's done some really good things, but if he loses, it's like throwing 5 picks in a game. It voids everything that you've done. He's got to win games. He's got to find a way to win games. He's got, the cards are stacked against him as far as the quarterback position goes. Just looking in the AFC West, the Raiders have the worst quarterbacks in the division. I'm not trying to say that disrespectfully, but Patrick Mahomes, better. Justin Herbert, better. Bo Nix, the Denver Broncos believe he's better. Obviously, we got to wait to see, but at least they have their guy that they feel like is their franchise quarterback. At the very least, you could say that about the AFC West. Every team outside of the Raiders have the guy that they believe is their franchise quarterback. Mahomes and Herbert definitely are. Bo Nix, we'll wait and see. The Raiders have Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. Neither one of those guys appear to be the franchise quarterback for the Silver and Black. Could that change this year? Sure. But I think when it's all said and done, the Raiders are probably going to have to dip into the draft and go get their guy. They can always try to sign a guy in free agency like a Dak Prescott if he becomes available, but that's going to cost you about $60 million a year. And then you're going to lose somebody. You're going to sacrifice someone. You got a handful of dudes right now on the defensive side of the ball that are all going to be free agents at the end of this year. You spend that kind of money on a Dak Prescott, you ain't going to have the kind of money that you need to sign the guys that are going to be difference makers on the defense, which is how AP wants to hang his hat. He wants to be that defensive-minded team that can get it done that way, also wants to get it done with the quarterback. So I think, just my personal opinion, the draft is the best way to go for their future quarterback. So that's all I got time for. Thanks so much for that text. Really good stuff. Raider X got a call from him, got a text from Tim from Southern Oregon. We'll get to those coming up tomorrow. Obviously, we'll be talking about what the roster looks like, the 53 men as of right now. And the other thing that Trey Wingo said when he was on my radio show, he said, Q, the worst part of this situation as they go through roster cuts isn't even the initial cuts, because a guy might make the 53-man roster and feel good, like, oh, hey, he avoided getting cut. Great. And then all of a sudden a guy gets cut from another team. And then all of a sudden the GM in front office looks and says, oh, that guy's available. Okay, well, hey, that guy, we barely cleared that guy on our roster. Let's go ahead and waive him and bring this other guy on. So you might think that you're out of harm's way when you make the initial 53-man roster, but even for a few days following that, you still kind of got to be on edge, because anything could happen where another guy gets waived from another team, and then your team decides that they want to bring him in as well. And I do believe the Raiders are going to be very active when it comes to the waiver wire. I think that they're going to bring in a handful of players that they have their eye on, so we'll see how that shakes out. But we'll know the initial 53-man roster. Well, at least they'll have it turned into the league by 1 p.m. Pacific time. We should have it no later than 2 o'clock, as Tom Telesco will meet with the media by way of Zoom. Of course, we'll have plenty of that sound coming up on the show tomorrow. We'll break down some of the roster cuts. We'll find out who's actually the surprise cuts and who's not. We'll find out who made the team and who didn't. We'll talk about that and more. Plus, we'll have your calls and texts. So we'll have a loaded show coming up tomorrow, as we always do. We're excited about it, getting closer and closer to the start of the regular season. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.